Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I'm very happy to open tonight's webinar in this Reimagining the Future series organized by Asia Society and in partnership tonight with the Consulate General of Switzerland and Hong Kong. My name is Katia Stampfli-Ferraz. I'm the Deputy Consul General of Switzerland here in Hong Kong. And I'm very happy that we could partner up with Asia Society. With us tonight to discuss a very important topic in this series about a sustainable future also in the welfare system. We have from Zurich, and came to know that it's also a bit snowing, it's Dr. Marco Salvi. Dr. Marco Salvi worked for a Swiss think tank called Avenir Suisse. So thank you very much, Dr. Salvi, to be here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Then we have Professor Ip from the Department of Social Work and Social Administration, Hong Kong, and Professor Tai-Lok, Chair Professor and Director at the Education University of Hong Kong. So tonight, we are going to answer some very important questions, some fundamental questions about the welfare system. Switzerland is considered a liberal market economy, but we have a quite efficient and well-developed social welfare system in place, which was firstly created in the 19th century, in the mid of the 19th century. So we already have, maybe I can say, almost 200 years of experience. The welfare system, of course, developed, and it's different from region to region in Switzerland. But I think it will be very interesting to talk about it tonight and to answer very important questions like, what is a social safety net? What is a sustainable model? Do we need it? Does it go against the principle of a free economy? And on the other side, I'm also very happy personally that we can have this conversation comparing Switzerland or some cities in Switzerland like Zurich and Geneva and Hong Kong, all beautiful cities, unfortunately all a bit expensive, because I think we can learn a lot from the discussion of today. So I very much look forward to the next 60 minutes. And on the other side, definitely less important, I'm very happy that we can talk about Switzerland, going a bit more in depth than the usual cliche of chocolate and watches, although it's very important. We all love our chocolate. But I think it's very important that we can really have a fundamental discussion, such an important topic. And very last is that for Switzerland, sustainability, it's an important topic. I know it's not only for Switzerland, all around the world. And I'm very glad and thankful to Asia Society to bring it also from a different point of view. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to the speaker and to Professor Tai-Lok, who will be the moderator. And thank you again to Asia Society and to all the participants for giving us the time and for who is listening from home to taking the time to listen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katia, and welcome everyone. And this evening, I do think that we have a very important topic for our discussion. Both Zurich and Hong Kong, I think at one point in time, we were both textbook cases. On the one side, we have a stronger welfare tradition. On the other side, Hong Kong is basically free market. At one point of time, people think that, you don't need to talk about social welfare and so on and so forth. But I mean, half a century later, of course, we look back then probably there are a lot to learn from each other, and then there are a lot of issues to be discussed. And our discussion happens in a context where we have the pandemic, and as a result of that, we have a revival of concerns about vulnerability, about sustainability, about how to take care of each other. And it is exactly in this kind of context that I think it would be very important to look at the experience of Switzerland. Which honestly, when I was a postgraduate student, though that was ages ago, the Alpine tradition, the Alpine system was supposed to be very strong in taking care of social needs and social security and so on and so forth. And on the other side, at one point of time in East Asia, of course, it seems that economic expansion and growth seem to be take care of everything. And then, of course, the family system would comes in, so you don't need to talk about the institutionalized social welfare. But now, again, looking back, we understand that probably Switzerland seems to be doing quite well to cope with unemployment and also to look at various issues emerging in recent changes in the past 2 decades. So without further ado, my role should be just a traffic conductor. So I would just like to call upon maybe Marco, you'd like to start first, and then I would call Paul to come in for the discussion. So Marco, you have something like 15, 18 minutes for highlighting your main ideas. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think that 10 will be enough. Thank you very much for having me. I'm here to learn tonight, more than to talk, maybe, because it's a fascinating topic, but it's also fascinating for me to have a view from afar, from such a dynamic reality as Hong Kong. And I think you already mentioned in your introduction some themes. You said, well, this is an Asian view that growth is the starting point of a sustainable welfare model, but I think that this also coincides with my view too. Maybe in Switzerland it's not a mainstream view, but I'm convinced that growth is the base of a strong social and welfare system. So maybe I just open my slides to show you some insights about that. I don't have many, but so. Okay, you can see that? It's okay? Oh, I can't listen. I don't.
No, I think you need to share screen.
Okay, I'm sharing the screen. Wait another moment. Okay, yes. Okay, voila. So, sorry about that.
Good.
Sorry about that. So I'm more a team guy than a Zoom guy. You know, it's the main difference. It used to be still water or plain water or sparkling water. Now it's Zoom or team. So I will start right away to stress the point I was making about the openness and growth. Well, growth is the base. Is the basis of a welfare system and the base of growth for Switzerland, and I guess this is the same for Hong Kong, is the openness of its economy to the world. So we are a very, very strongly integrated economy, integrated into Europe. We are not in the European Union, but our economy is a member of this very important market, a very intense cooperation with the EU. So you see, we are very globalized in this globalization index. Switzerland is one of the most globalized country, and we have also can achieve through that a very high national income per capita. So I think this is already the main point of my discussion. Without growth, without a strong economy, you don't have a strong social welfare system. So you mentioned the labor market, and I think that the labor market is essential there, because we will talk about redistribution of income. Here, it's about pre-distribution. So what happens before the state intervenes and redistribute means and money across individuals, households, regions. So we have a very, I think it's the core asset for the Swiss economy. After this openness, or because of that, it's strong labor market. So here you see, compared to some other European countries and the OECD, the participation to the labor market, we have a very high participation rate to the labor market. And at the same time, this is the black column. And at the same time, we have a relatively moderate unemployment rate. So it's about 4% in a standardized unemployment rate. And you see, there are not many Swiss in this age bracket that don't work. So I think that's also very important when we'll talk about social welfare redistribution. It's the labor market, the possibility to yes, to have an income. So that's a central feature of our system. Not only we have a very high job participation, labor market participation, and a low unemployment rate, but we have quite a low income inequality. And I think this is linked. You see here a chart plotting the income inequality and wage inequality. So we have a very low wage inequality compared even with Scandinavian countries. So you mentioned Switzerland as a liberal country. I think that's true, but at the same time is also a very equal country. When we look at those measures of inequality, wage inequality, like the Gini coefficient. So a low income inequality despite a high average income. So that's quite a strong point. Well, but that doesn't mean that we don't pay taxes. So in order to have a strong welfare system, you need to tax a lot. And there is this idea, maybe abroad, I don't know if you, alongside the chocolate and the watches, Switzerland is a tax haven. But it's not a tax haven for residents. That's maybe surprising. We have a very low corporation tax rate, but we have a normal, in quote, a normal taxation rate from the point of view of the residents. If we consider income taxation or social security contribution. Here you see a very simple chart starting from the per capita net national income, which is about 76,000 Swiss francs or dollar. You can more or less, it's 1-to-1. So you a quarter of this income is then taken as taxes, income taxes, VAT, but also capital taxes, here included every kind of taxes. And the more important part are the social security and pension contributions, which amount to 28% of this per capita income. And then those taxes and social security contribution, they are redistributed in form of transfers, or they are spent, taxes are spent in form of government expenditures, education, defense, all this government spending. And at the end of the road, the disposable personal income is about 72% of this starting point of the per capita net national income. So you see the red part here means that we have quite high taxes, which is not, even for Swiss, if you ask a Swiss, do we have a high level of taxation? They will answer, no, we have low taxation, but they forget that we have a lot of social security, compulsory social security and pension contribution that make, that are even larger in size than our taxes. So what are our main social systems or social security, social insurances? Well, we have a fairly standard continental safety net. You mentioned an Alpine system. Well, it's not much different than Austria or Germany. We have a first pillar, old age pensions, AHV, called AHV, which is about is financed through a contribution of around 9% of the gross wages, and pays around a very low sum per month, around $2,000 on average. This is the first pillar, and it's well below the, well, for some people that have incomplete contributions, or they don't have a full benefit here, this is much lower than the poverty rate. But this pension is topped by a complementary pension system, which is tax financed, not a contribution from wages, but is financed by the tax systems, and is means tested. So you come up to the poverty rate, which is depends on where you live, depends on your situation, on housing situation and so on. But say it's around 3,500 francs, Swiss francs. Then we have the most important part for many households in Switzerland is the occupational pension plan. And we pay around 18% of income, wages, as a contribution to the privately run pension system. So the old age pension is a state-run system, but this occupational pension system is privately run, and it's, for many people, for many households, is the main source of pension wealth. It's much more important than the first pillar. And then I will also mention our health plan, which is a per capita finance. It is a poll tax. You can say it's a poll tax. So that is very regressive. So if you are rich, you pay almost the same as poor people, and it is very contentious from a political point of view. Well, if you are below some thresholds, you will get some contribution from the state to pay those privately run health plans. So this is the main. These are I would say, the main pillars of our welfare system. There are many others. If disability insurance, you have some form of other form of insurance, motherhood, and so on. But I think this is the bulk of the system. And you see, it's a mix of mean testing and universal benefits. It's a mix of wage taxes and the tax system, and also a regressive poll tax or per capita financing. So I would finish with these slides. I think this is well and fine, but at the end of the day, the very core strength, or the biggest asset of the welfare system or the social net is the labor market, with this very, very high participation rate for a European country. And why do we have such a high participation rate? Well, it is we have quite a flexible labor market regulation. So in Europe, we have in continental Europe, because the UK is very similar to Switzerland in this regard, we have not a very stringent employment protection regulation. So it's easy to fire people, and also easy to hire them. I must say that it's just for the individual case. So it's not for the collective case. When we have a company laying off many hundreds of people, there we have a stronger employment protection. But I think the most important is this part. We have the least stringent individual employment protection and a high turnover on the labor market, people losing their job, but also people finding quite easily a job. And then we have this institution called social partnership, which is very interesting. It's in each country, it's different. And Switzerland has, I think, a very good system where Actually, it's a discussion between social partners. It's a discussion between unions and employers. And the state has very little to say in that. So through bargaining, the wage and labor condition are bargained in a bargaining process at a very decentral level. So it's sectoral and regional, and they bargain over minimum wage, over labor condition, and the state, the confederation, or even the cantons, they don't have a say in that. And we don't have a compulsory federal minimum wage. This is a bit the other side of the medal. If we have wages and unions and employers bargaining over wages, it doesn't make sense to have a very important federal minimum wage, because this would fix a minimum wage that is fixed through the bargaining process in Switzerland. And then, of course, the dual system. We have around 2/3 of 15-year-olds that finish the obligatory schooling that will choose the vocational educational training path, and only about 20% of Swiss young Swiss go to a university or ETH or this kind of. So that means that we have two ways to attain to gain access to the labor market. One way is very direct; it goes through the companies and to the employers, and not through. Well, what does it mean? It means that employers, they will define the curricula, what those young people, those 15, 16, 17 years old will learn in the company. They will define the curricula. This is unions or even the state has not much to say about that. And this is financed through the companies and financed through the young people themselves. They get a very small wage, which is about $600 per month, because they are learning in the company and not afterwards the companies will decide to keep them or to say, no, we are not interested to having you in our company anymore when they have finished their apprenticeship. So this is a very, very important part of our social net, because it allows to enter directly the labor market. There is not a high barrier of entry. Barriers of entry existing in many countries in Europe, especially in the south, in southern countries. So in France or Spain or Italy, which have a very high level of youth unemployment. So this, I think, well, it's 12 minutes now, or even more, it's 15. So it was a good prediction that I will talk longer than I thought. So thank you very much for the attention. I'm eager to answer a question. And yes, I kick the ball to Hong Kong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. I think you have given us a very good summary of the major points and highlight how Switzerland is able to combine pro-growth, supporting growth, development, but at the same time with a very strong commitment to welfare. And also, it seems to me that an economy place a lot of emphasis on investment, individually invest in your own longer-term development, including post-retirement, livelihood, but at the same time, employer investing in skill building, vocational training. I think it offers some very thought-provoking ideas. And then we'll come back to you later on, of course, after Paul's discussion. So now, Professor Paul Yip.
Thank you for the invitation to be able to share some of the experiences in Hong Kong. As dialogue has been mentioned, I think Hong Kong is really work on a free market. And then I think the government, it takes the view that I think they encourage and support the people capable of working, I think, to achieve the self-reliance through employment. So I think what you can see in Hong Kong, I think we have one of the longest working hours, which is sometimes is a bit too long. But at the same time, I think our government also try to put in place a reasonable and sustainable social welfare system, I think, for rendering appropriate assistance to the needy. So that's why I think we have some sort of support, I think, for those people who are unemployed. And then we have the comprehensive social security assistance. And then it turns out, I think during the COVID, I think our CSSA number, it has gone up, I think, from 220,000 and go up to 310,000. But as a matter of fact, I think if we look at the historical data, I mean, for the past 5 years, I think the number who received in CSSA is getting less and less each year. So what it means, I think the Hong Kong people, I think they tends to not to rely on the social security system. We tend to go out to work, and sometimes we can see the people, I think, taking 2 jobs or even 3 jobs. Sometimes it's just not very good to the mental health. And at the same time, I think we provide the support, I think, for the elderly. I think we have the old age living allowances, and also we have the old age allowances, which are mean tax. So you have to your asset or your earning have to less and certain amount of money, and then the government will give you the support. And at this stage, it's about $3,800 per month. And we have this so-called fruit money. The fruit money, what it means, that is the money given to all elderly. I think this is not mean test. I think it is $1,400. So actually, when you look at this number, when it added up, it is not a small number. And then especially in Hong Kong, I think our tax rate, I think, would be much less than Swiss. I think we are talking about the top rate is about 15%. However, I think behind this so-called the relative low tax rate, I think in Hong Kong, I think we do suffer from a very expensive accommodation cost. I think according to the latest survey, I think Hong Kong people, I think it takes them more than 20 years, I think, using their median income, if they're earning median income, to afford a medium house. This median an apartment. So it's about 20 years. So it has become unaffordable. Now, when I look at the statistic, I mean, it shows that in Switzerland, I think they say that becomes homeowners at the average age of 48, So I think in Hong Kong, I think we are talking about 48. I think we still have about, I think, less than 30% of people, I think they can own their own home. So I think what happened, I think during the COVID-19 2020, the government also spent a lot of money, I think, to provide some short-term relief measure, I think, to help those families who are more vulnerable. And actually, the Hong Kong Poverty Situation Report just released last month. I think it has suggested, I think the Hong Kong government has increased its social welfare spending, I think, in the past 10 years by 140%. 140%. Even our GDP growth can enjoy about 5 to 7% each year. So at that rate of increase, I mean, everybody is concerning about whether it is sustainable or not. But what really concerns us is that I think the government has not made a lot of so-called to tackle some more structural problem. I think it still put a lot of emphasis on the short-term relief measure. That costs a lot of money, but that is not very sustainable. And because, as you can see, in the past decade or so, our poverty rate, which is measured as 50% of less than of the median income, I mean, has gone up. I think now we're talking 1.65 3 million people, I think about 23.6%, I think who are suffering from poverty. So and also, but what the government have been saying that, well, due to the amount of the so-called the post-government intervention, whether it's by cash or cash in kind, it has reduced, I think, the number from 23.6%, I think, to 7.9%. But one thing I was very concerning about, first of all, whether it's sustainable, and secondly, whether it is effective. So I think, yes, I think now we are still having about 6 or 7% of our GDP growth. And what we are concerning about whether I think this growth can continue, especially I think in view of the aging population. But one good thing about Hong Kong, I have to say, is about our health system. I mean, not like in the Swiss, we do not have to pay for the health tax. It actually, I think Hong Kong has enjoyed one of the longest life expectancy, which is 83 for men and 89 for women. And then one of the very important factors is a quality healthcare. So what happened, whether you have a hip surgery or whether you have an intestinal problem, and then when you go to the hospital, and then you just can walk out to pay $100, I think, per day, which is a very, very small amount of money. So I think that's one way it's good. I think our health system, it actually can manage, I think, to narrow down, I think, the income inequality in Hong Kong. As you see, our Gini coefficient is about 0.543 now. So it is actually as one of the highest in the high income country. But what happened in Hong Kong, we do have some structural problem. What we believe when we have the economic growth, I think it will be benefit, I think, the majority of the people. But unfortunately, I think due to some structural problems, I think what happened, we still can enjoy our economic growth, but unfortunately, I think it's only a few rather than the majority, I think, can enjoy, I think, the economic growth. When we look at the data, it seems that in 1991 up to year of 2000, I think all the people, they can enjoy the salary growth by nearly 80% to 100%. But in 2001, I think to 2010, I think what will happen, some sector, we have negative growth in their salary. But on the other hand, when you're looking at the property cost, I think it has gone up, I think, by 163%. So I think it has become the gap, I mean, the income gap between the have not has been growing bigger. And then when we're looking at the income distribution, I mean, we found that the top 10 or 20%, they still enjoy about 10 or 20% of the growth. But the bottom, I think 50% or so, I think still they remain at that value, I think, for the past 10 years. So that's why we have this so-called M-shaped society, right? There's a polarization. I mean, there are more people, I think, who are earning more, and then more people who are earning less. So our middle class is disappearing. And actually, I always can say some of the problem in Hong Kong, I think, is really related to the poverty, to the distribution of the wealth. What I like to highlight a bit more is about some of the problem, I think, is very structural. It is because of this outsourcing arrangement. I think we have identified those low-income people. Some of them, they are working as an outsourcing worker. And this outsourcing worker, they are employed by the Hong Kong government. But rather than the Hong Kong work, it is rather the Hong Kong government employ them directly. They use an outsourcing company to employ them, such that I think they offload some of the responsibility. And somehow, I'm not sure the cost has been reduced much. But what happened is this group of low-skilled people, they're working for the government, some sort of contracts, but their salary, I think, has been retained at a very low level. But in view of this, what the government has been doing, I think they introduced those so-called the working family allowances. So because they're working on the government project and because they have a low income, and then the government feel that, well, they should be given more, so they are providing some so-called the work family allowances. But what I would thought that, hey, if you are doing this, why can't you just employ them directly? It actually, the marginal cost will be quite limited, but there will be 60 or even 80,000 of the people, they are being benefited. Because at this moment, I think we have 270,000 of our young people, I think age 18 or less, they live in the poverty household. It actually has a substantial impact, I think, to their development. And also, I think we worry about their youth mobility, their upward mobility. We also worry about the so-called the intergeneration poverty. So, I mean, if their parents, I think if they're poor, if they cannot provide the sufficient resources for them to develop, I think they're being deprived of a lot of opportunities. So one thing I just hope that I think our government, I mean, might be learning something from the Swiss model, I think to making a bit more long-term investment, I think to try to change the system in a way that the people, I think, can be feel more secure, can feel better supported. When we're looking at what the government has been spending, $300 billion, I think, during the 2020 because of the COVID-19. And then I do hope that if the government have that amount of money, it should be able to set up a universal pension system, I think, for the all elderly in Hong Kong. I still remember, I think one of our colleagues, Professor Nelson Chow, I think has done a consultative study for the Hong Kong government, and then suggesting that, hey, we only need about $50 billion, I mean, plus some additional contribution from the employer and some contribution from the employee. We can have some sort of this universal pension, I think up to 30 or 50 years. But then I think I just hope that I think with the resources we have in our reserve now, we can plan better. And then one of the things I always feel about the people in Hong Kong is as we live to work, we work to live. I think we have really have a long working hours, which is too much, and especially for the low skilled workers. And then that's certainly, it is not very good for the well-being of the community, and it's not going to be sustainable. So I do hope, I think with this exchange, I think we can learn from one another, I think, to improve the overall well-being of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I have collected a few questions, and perhaps I'll try to simplify a couple of them into a question to pose to Marco and Paul. And of course, it also echoed the main theme of this evening's discussion is the questions about sustainability. Marco, you have presented a model to us that basically it seems to be like what you said, the secret sauce of Switzerland is a combination of openness of the economy, growth, and then you also generate jobs, but at the same time you have social security. This seems to be almost an ideal world to many of us. But then the question, of course, is, as a lot of people would have asked you before, is how sustainable is this? And what exactly is the pillar of its sustainability? Is it about, at the end of the day, about economic competitiveness, and so as a result, you have jobs, you have high labor participation rate, and that's why make it possible? And similarly, a question about sustainability to Paul. In the case of Hong Kong, it seems to be quite strange in the sense that we haven't even started to have a welfare state, but we already seem to have entered a stage of very critical development. That is, you don't really have a lot of welfare, and people are spending money, and the government is spending money, but seems to be going nowhere. And like what you said, we have aging population, labor participation rate doesn't look too good, and we have high income inequality, long working hours. We seem to have everything except we still pay 15, 18% tax, and that looks on surface seems to be quite good, but in structural terms, not quite sustainable. So I throw these questions about longer term sustainability to both of you. So maybe Marco?
Yes, well, that's a very important question. Sustainability is an issue in Switzerland at the moment, the sustainability of the pension system, because we have a very rapid aging. So I guess Hong Kong has also, or this is a worldwide phenomenon. So at the moment, it is clear that our system is transferring wealth from the future generation to this current generation, because pensions are too generous compared to benefits. And there have been calculations made about the fiscal gap meaning the difference between the present value of the future pensions and compared to the present value of the future contributions. And we see that we have a fiscal gap, or the pension gap, of 160% of GDP. So Switzerland has a very low debt. The Swiss state has a very low debt. Even after Corona, after the pandemics, we still have something like, I guess, the range of 30% ratio between debt and GDP. So quite low, much lower than our neighbors. But if you count the pensions, the pension system, and the promises that have been made to future pensioners, this doesn't look that well. Well, how will we change that? I have a high confidence in our democratic system. So at the end, it will be the people themselves that will have to decide on that. And they are very reluctant. They have been very reluctant in having a higher pension age. So we have a very low pension age compared to our neighbors, even of 64 for women and 65 for men in Germany or Denmark or Nordics. It's increasing, but ours is not. So at the end, I think the people will notice that they are, and that this is not sustainable, and that the cost will be paid by the children and children's children. So this is a very important issue, and it's one of the main political problems at the moment. But just to finish, I think we have a very good mix between the private pension system and the public system, universal system. It's a good system because it's resilient. As I can say, in many dimensions. So if the stock market is going bad, this is bad for the private pension system. But if we have a lot of immigration, this is favorable to the universal system. So you ensure with these with these three pillars, because we have also private savings, you insure against a lot of possible risk, and you have then a quite a resilient system. But the issue of sustainability is felt also in Switzerland because of aging.
Well, I think one thing what we can do in Hong Kong, I think, is to look at our minimum wages, I think, very carefully. I think we are talking about, at this moment, we still talk about $37.5 per hour. I think I have created a latte index, I mean, to reflect how low is our minimum wages. We talk about how much cup of latte you can buy per minimum per an hour of your minimum wages. But in Hong Kong, it's only 1 cup of latte. But in Zurich, I think we're talking about 4. I mean, so I think
have expensive latte.
But your
Yeah.
your minimum wages is also much higher. We are talking about at least having 3 or 4 times higher than in Hong Kong. So I think, as I said before, I think in Hong Kong, I think the low income earners, I think they do suffer. I think they do not have a very big bargaining power. We do not have the union. I think the law itself, it doesn't protect them so well. So I think that's something we have to work on. And then the other thing is about the MPF. I think this arrangement, I think we have the, we call the Mandatory Protection Fund. I think it was introduced 30 years ago, and now it started to kick in. I think the benefit can be felt now for those soon to be old people. But I think those who are old already, I think they are suffering. And also for those homemakers, I mean, most of them, they are women. I think these are the people who would not be able to benefit from the MPF arrangement. So I think that is something I think the government should look at. And then the other, I think it is the housing. I think I always say that I think in Hong Kong, I think we still have 30% of the people who live in the public housing. Is amazing. You know, in such a high income city, I think we still have 30%, I think, stay in the public housing. And then the home ownership rate is still less than 50%. And then in the past 10 years, or in the past 20 years, it has not been changed. And then our living area, I think we're talking about 50% of our household size is less than 500 square feet. So what you can see, I think the people are really living in a very cramped areas. And I'm not sure that can be changed, I think, in a short time, but I mean, at least I think we should be creating more public space, I think, to compensate, I think, for the expenses, the public space. So I think these are the things I think the government can do, I think, in the long term, I think, to improve, I think, the quality of life of the Hong Kong people.
Thank you, Paul. Paul mentioned gender, and from the floor, I also received a question concerning, potential impacts on women. So I'd like to follow up by asking the questions. So far, we talk about Social Security, but what about in connection to gender or public gender inequality, and also racial ethnic minorities? How secure are they? And then, of course, towards the end, Paul also mentioned the question about housing, accommodation. I'm also curious about the situation in Switzerland. Not really a big country, of course, a lot larger than Hong Kong, but still, I mean, compared with a lot of countries, you probably also have the questions about population and space. So how do you deal with it?
Well, it's
Marco?
very interesting to see that we have similar problems. Housing, the home ownership rate in Switzerland is very low. It's the lowest of the European countries. It's around 40%. And we have a lot of renters in cities. In Zurich or Geneva, it's 90% are renters and only 10% are home owners. So, well, that would be a topic for itself. It would be interesting for me to know how this housing assistance is, in which form is given. In Switzerland, we have in Zurich 20% of, say, non-commercial housing. So it's a very large share for Swiss, for the Switzerland, in the whole of Switzerland is just 1%. So you see it's concentrated in the large cities, which have higher rents. And it's a very important political problem. It's, I think, the political problem #1 in the Swiss cities and also in European cities. In the north of Europe, it's a very, very so how to increase supply? Maybe we should also decrease demand in a way, because maybe there are some state and policies that increase the demand. So by allowing people to live in Zurich, which is even if they maybe shouldn't afford it That's a very hard question to discuss, but I think we have to discuss, and I will be interested to learn from Hong Kong, which has this unique situation. And I guess housing will always be expensive in Hong Kong. I guess that you cannot do something. Well, we can do something about that, but this is a fact, and that's also what I tell my country people, that Zurich is an expensive city and will be always be. You cannot with a magic wand change this situation. So that's interesting to see, where we have quite a few parallels there about sustainability and for example in housing. And just one sentence about gender, also very important. We have a high gender pension gap because women are participating less intensely in the labor market. We have a high participation rate, but a few hours. We have a part-time economy so that's an issue. And our proposition at Avenir Suisse is changing the tax system that is not favorable to the second income. We have a joint taxation of income. If you are married, or both wages will be taxed as one, and that has a lot of bad incentives for second wages or lower wages. And well, I think that would be the way to increase female labor participation, and also to resolve at the end this gender pension gap. Yes.
Thank you, Marco. Paul?
I think we see in Hong Kong, our women working participation rate is only about 50%, which is much less than our European counterparts. I think one of the reasons, because of Hong Kong, I think our so-called family-friendly policy is not well in place. So some of the working women, they have to make a choice whether they like to continue to work, or if they like to have a family, if they like to have a babies. And then I think they have to force having to stay at home. So I think one thing, I think if we really want to hope to improve the gender equity, the situation, I think the childcare support system is very important. I think we just did a study, I mean, for the Hong Kong government, and it showed that I think our childcare services is have much room for improvement. I think each year we have 40-something birth. I think only 2,000, I think the government support places are available, I mean, to the working women. And then the other thing, I think for the gender issue, I think we talk about at the old age. I think, as we know, I think our older women, I think they have 6 years, the life expectancy longer than men. So I think how to provide the support, I think, of this elderly, I think is another challenging question.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Marco. Time is running out. Seems to pass too quickly because we just warm up for a tall agenda for a lot of issues to be discussed. And but somehow I think both of you have convinced me that probably we should have more dialogues between Switzerland and Hong Kong. The topics that we just discussed about Social Security is probably a good beginning, and of course labor market, unions, all these issues definitely come into the picture, especially in the context of Hong Kong in search of a new beginning, not only in the context of recent development, but also in the context of how to re-engineer economic growth and development here. So thank you very much, Marco. I think it's lunch hour over there, and I hope that I haven't starved you.
Well, when I'm starving, I'm getting aggressive. So in debates, I always try to eat before.
Okay, thank you, Marco, and thank you, Paul. And so I would pass it to the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Executive Director of Asia Society Hong Kong, Alice Wong, and I'm delighted that we had this conversation this evening. A lot of food for thought. we're going to do dinner here and Marco is going to be doing lunch soon. But seriously, it's really, this is what Asia Society Hong Kong is really about in terms of learning, mutual understanding. And another similarity that Hong Kong has, we also have an Asia Society center in Switzerland, in Zurich. So, and in fact, last time I was in Switzerland, last time we could travel, many of us, was in June of 2019. And I remember I was really shocked to arrive seeing the women's protest in June of 2019. I literally walk into it. And so I think that's another topic that I'm sure in the future we can collaborate on and invite women panelists and women speakers. But I want to, on behalf of Asia Society, again, my heartiest gratitude to the Consulate General of Switzerland and Hong Kong. Katya, thank you. And we look forward to future participation of programs like this. And in fact, tomorrow we have this week, we have two programs coming up, Innovation Collaboration, Lessons Learned from Finland and Hong Kong. And that is tomorrow. And then another program the following day on talent acquisition in this digital era. Again, I think this is a good time. I think we've been all locked in for almost 2 years, and it's a great time to contemplate and to learn from each other. So I want to again thank Professor Yip, Professor Lui, and Marco in Switzerland. Thank you all for this wonderful program, and again, I want to thank you, our team and the consulate, and look forward to future collaboration. And have a wonderful evening and a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.